We'll begin with the reflections on universal well-being. May I abide in well-being, in freedom from affliction, in freedom from hostility, in freedom from ill will, in freedom from anxiety, and may I maintain well-being in myself. May everyone abide in well-being, in freedom from hostility, in freedom from ill will, in freedom from anxiety, and may they maintain well-being in themselves. May all be released from all suffering, and may they not be parted from the good fortune they have attained. When they act upon intention, all beings are the owners of their action and inherit its results. Their future is born from such action, companion to such action, and results will be their home. All actions with intention, be they skillful or harmful, of such acts they will be the heirs. So good morning, everyone. This is day 5 of our meditation session here at Berkeley Monastery. And wanted to continue on this theme of loving kindness. During these 3 weeks, we called the retreat contemplative listening, trying to explore the many dimensions of how we can listen. The first we said was somatic listening, tuning into the body, hearing what it's trying to tell us, the aches and pains, maybe the places where it's comfortable, at ease, and begin to honor what's there. Rather than what often happens is that we disassociate from our bodies, or we just indulge our bodies. In this practice is just being aware of our bodies. And if we were just to stay with that practice, it actually can lead to liberation. The Buddha describes how profound this practice is. The second level was empathic listening, the ability to hear what our heart is saying. And what we found was very helpful for that is this kind of unconditional care of loving kindness. And the Buddha was actually quite, I shared yesterday an actual guided meditation around loving kindness, and people shared that they weren't sure if they wanted to use that as a method because they already had their own method, which I think is very appropriate. My intent of sharing the method wasn't so much to say to use this as your new method of practice, but trying to share with everyone that there's actually a way to approach life that's not from the perspective of right and wrong, but rather from the perspective of well-being and suffering. The Noble Eightfold Path, this approach to life is called right view. Right view is essentially the 4 noble truths. What are the 4 noble truths? There's the first one, which is the noble truth of suffering. And the Buddha was very clear. Suffering isn't we try to avoid suffering, he said. It's not trying to avoid suffering. Some people think, Buddhism is not about suffering, it's about avoiding suffering. I was actually just on a trip with somebody, and he asked an interesting question. He asked me, so how would a Buddhist respond if she's married to somebody who doesn't do the dishes, and they keep talking about it, but it's just a lot of suffering. And I asked him, so what do you think? I said, well, I think Buddhism is not about suffering, so maybe she should get a divorce, just avoid the suffering. I said, well, I don't know. That's the first response. I said, actually, in the First Noble Truth, the Buddha said, you want to understand suffering. You want to fully know suffering. Right? Dukkha. Understand the unsatisfactory nature of our existence. And as you deeply reflect on it, the Buddha said the second noble truth is, where does suffering come from? And he says it comes from this, he used the word trishna, or this thirst. Jing Wei Shu yesterday talked about lacking, which I think is maybe a better way to make it connect to our hearts. Which that this suffering comes from a deep lacking. We feel somehow we're incomplete. And then we go out and do what? We pursue sensuality. We pursue distractions. We have our digital devices, we have food, the 5 desires: wealth, fame, sex, food, and sleep. Or we go to sleep, just numb everything out. So that's one way we go out, to try to fill that lack. The second one is we try to become somebody, the bhava tanha. We try to become somebody important, somebody worthy of respect, somebody that will be appreciated by other people, praised by other people, liked by other people. I definitely had that still deep in my psyche, so I'm constantly trying to work on it. But I remember growing up when I was in elementary and middle school. I changed elementary schools when I was a kid, and I was teased a lot growing up, and it was miserable. I didn't want to go to school because it was so hard going to school and being teased and feeling like no one cared about me. And I remember I went to the library and just read a lot of books, and I actually won an award at the end of the year saying, he read a lot of books, something. I did all these little tests on this computer. It was kind of like a test at the book that you read, and I got like 90 books, which was like a huge number of books in the school at the time, because you had to also take a test on it. But I remember when I won that award, in my heart, it was more of a symbol of my loneliness, that, I didn't have any friends. And so I just took refuge in books. And then as I kind of went to middle school, reunited with some of my friends from before, I developed a personality. I really wanted people to like me. I didn't want to be left out. Didn't want to be isolated. And so I developed this kind of really wanting to please people, to be liked, be very sensitive to looking around to see what people liked and trying to fit their image of how I'm supposed to be okay. And each of us develop our own strategies. Maybe rather than trying to please people, we develop an angry personality, because through anger, we feel like we're in charge. We can control things, right? So this is bhava tanha. The first one is kama tanha, or trishna. The second is bhava tanha, just wanting to become. And the third kind of thirst is actually abhava tanha, not wanting to become, trying to numb out our experience, sometimes leading to suicide. And this is, sometimes we try so hard to please people, try so hard to exist, try so hard to create an identity, and at some point we just don't want to do it anymore. We say, this is too tough. I don't want to just keep running this treadmill, trying to please people. And so one day, people just end it. I remember there's this poem that I don't remember the quote exactly, but it painted this picture of this perfect person. All the people looked up to him, very proper. Everything in his life seemed all together. And they said at night, one day, He went home, took a gun, and just shot himself. I remember reading that as a adolescent in high school and just feeling, yeah, I can feel that. That kind of feeling sometimes when we just work so hard and trying to create an identity, but even sometimes we work so hard and everything seems to be falling apart. We end up fighting with our parents, not getting along with our friends or the people around us, unable to really even accept ourselves, just kind of in this depressed kind of stupor, not sure what we're doing with ourselves. So that's what the Buddha says is the source of suffering. It comes from inside. And it would be pretty depressing if the Buddha only gave us two noble truths, suffering and the cause of suffering. Fortunately, he gave us two more, which is the third one, which is there is the cessation of suffering. There is nibbana. Or another way to say it is, there's a way to be truly happy, to cultivate an unconditional sense of well-being. And what did he say that way was? That's the fourth noble truth, the Eightfold Path. Or sometimes it's said as the three non-outflow studies. The Noble Eightfold Path begins with what? Right view. And right view is the Four Noble Truths. Is to begin to see our experience not in some kind of idealization of myself or idealization of how things are supposed to be, but from looking very carefully at what's suffering, what's its cause, what's real happiness, and how do I cultivate that real happiness. And that's what we're trying to do here in this meditation retreat, and those online who have been joining us day after day in practice, is we're not here to suffer. We're here to find real happiness. And it's important to stay attuned to that way of seeing things, because sometimes it can feel tough, right? 5th day of the retreat. You're just like, gosh, I don't know. My body's sore. I'm tired, hungry, maybe a little bit cold. And it's like, this is suffering. This is suffering. But actually, interesting enough, the Buddha said or the Master said, this is the suffering that ends suffering. Oftentimes in the world, we use suffering. We create suffering trying to escape suffering by drinking, indulging our senses, and so forth. But this is the way to get free of suffering. And so what is right intention? I'll just maybe end with this. So right view goes to right intention. I think this linkage is very important, because the intention comes from seeing the world in a particular way, right? Looking at suffering and the freedom from suffering. And when you look at the world through that lens, naturally your heart goes to kindness, to compassion. Because you don't want to suffer, and you don't want other people to suffer. So rather than looking at the world from ways that how I think things are supposed to be, that was oftentimes my way of approaching the world. For instance, when I wanted to become a monk and I had a conflict with my parents, I would say, well, this is what I want to do. And I'm right, they're wrong. I'm right, they're wrong. Just that thought is very dangerous. It's a very dangerous thought, because it leads to a lot of suffering in our own experience, in our relationships, all throughout the world. We end up in wars where people actually kill each other, right? With weapons, they slice off each other's body parts and shoot each other in the head. That's the seed. Rather than what? For me, it took me some time to realize, to really say, oh, you know what? My parents actually really care about me. And they see the world in a different way. But what I want to do is really listen to them very deeply with empathy. This is empathic listening. Listening to them very deeply to their hearts. Not just the words that they're saying, but all the way to the care in their hearts, the deep values that they want to share with me. So for instance, with my mom, I think one of the things that I began to realize was that she really valued relationships. And she didn't want to see me walk this path and somehow reject the relationships, the friendships that I had. Or reject the family, to cut off my connection with the family. And as I began to realize that, I could assure her, no, I'm walking this path not to cut off my relationship with the family or my friends, but because I deeply care about my family and friends, that I want to find something that's true happiness that I can bring back home, that can help. And with my father, I could see he really valued productivity, contribution, efficiency. And over time, until my dad, I'm not rejecting being productive, being efficient. But in fact, this is the way I really feel I can contribute to the world. Maybe for you it was making money, contributing to technology and so forth. For me, I really want to contribute to the well-being of relationships and family and so forth. And it wasn't immediate. It took maybe a few decades. But I can see, for instance, this last weekend, maybe 2 weekends ago, my parents came and visited Reva Vihara, and we had a group gathering. And I can see my mom very happy because she could see I was in a web of relationships, wholesome relationships, among good friends. It wasn't I was isolated by myself. And I think my dad also could see, my son's contributing to the world in his way. Different than what I expected, but worthwhile. Worthwhile. And so, it takes time. It takes time. And this is what I think loving kindness allows for, is that we look past the words to the heart. And so what we were hoping in this retreat, in addition to our meditation topic, is to begin to see the world from a different lens. Listen to the world from a different place. Not so much what we're often taught from this place of right and wrong, of my way or no way, but from a place of really caring. And then what happens is then we really can heal. Not just our relationships around us, but ourselves. So I just maybe encourage that for everyone today, is to see if you can look at the world through the lens of suffering and the freedom of suffering. Or another way to frame it is happiness, and how do I really, truly cultivate that kind of happiness? I think that's a really worthwhile question. Okay, so let's do 3 steps, 1 bow.